Hey everybody, welcome to Improv FAQ at Length. This is a series of longer conversations about improv topics that have lots of questions surrounding them. And today, Bob and I are joined by a good friend of mine here in New York, Rocky Powell.
Hey guys!
Yay!
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited.
Yeah, I'm really glad you could join us.
Yeah.
Rocky and I know each other from the People's Improv Theater in New York, and we're on a house team together, or were up until the quarantine. And so we never really had a last show. In fact, our last show was supposed to be on your birthday, Rocky.
I know. That was crazy that got the whole thing. I don't know. We haven't really been doing the virtual shows as a team on Wednesday nights, but I mean, I was really looking forward to that show because it was going to be the Wednesday night, get some people there, celebrate my birthday, but such a bummer.
Well, we'll have to make up for it when we can.
But
we would usually hang out before shows, and actually something that you and Bob have in common, Rocky, is that as a warm up, your preferred thing to do to settle in is to just have conversations and check in with each other.
Yeah.
And I miss being able to do that with you, so I'm excited to talk some improv shop.
Me too.
Yeah.
Guys, are we warming up right now?
This is the warm up.
This is our warm up?
I'm feeling warm, honestly. I feel very warm.
I'm feeling literally warm because like now that it is getting warmer, but this window right here is just like, I'm like, oh, black was a bad choice.
Yeah, I moved. I was sitting over by the window. I was like, it's not happening. It's too hot on my back.
Yeah. But so the topic of this conversation is going to be about playing the moment. And, you know, I'm phrasing it that way with something in particular in mind, and I guess maybe we can figure out exactly what it is in the conversation, but it's a little bit more specific than playing in the moment or being in the moment. It's maybe having more to do with like impulses or a willingness to follow things and turn on a dime. And it's also, in my mind, about being available at all moments, because in my experience playing with you, Rocky, and watching you play, I've always thought that, especially at the top of scenes, that you're very available to your scene partners, and you're really great about locking into a scene. But at the same time, I've seen you make impulsive moves that, just chase the fun or a fun idea or a fun moment. And so I thought that'd be a cool topic to for the three of us to chat about with you.
Yeah, for sure. I love that topic. And thank you for those compliments.
Yeah. So, Rocky, first of all, do you feel that way, that you're able to keep pretty present throughout a show and available?
Yeah, I try to, at least. Obviously, every improv show is going to be different, but I really do try to. I think that's something that comes with either immediate skill, those, new improvisers who start out and they're just raw talent when it comes to improv, or I think it takes years to kind of be good at playing in the moment, because I think we all have so many ideas, and when you're on stage, the general you as the improviser, you think what you're going to say is going to be the funniest thing. That's going to be the thing that tears the house down. It's going to be the most TJ and Dave-esque moment. So many of us think that while we're on stage, but it's not.
True.
Yeah.
I love this. Yeah.
This is going to be great.
And then it flops. And I feel like those moments when stuff flops, it's because we're not listening to our scene partner. And that is the struggle of staying in the moment, is like listening and responding to what the last thing you just heard was, not the idea that you had on the sidelines, and then you come back out and you're like, but, and then you do your thing and it doesn't make sense with what your teammates have been doing. So in those moves, when you do stay in the moment, in my experience, when you do stay in the moment and you do celebrate your teammate's idea by building on it, rather than saying, drilling in with your idea, those are the more successful shows.
Yeah, absolutely.
I like that. Because we talk a lot about you got to make bold choices, got to make today different. Everything's got to be unique and interesting and play to the, height of your imagination.
Yeah.
But you should, when you're doing that thing, it should be adjacent to everything that's been laid out,
Yeah.
So yeah, making those big wonky moves that like why does this exist in this world that we created? It throws everybody off.
Totally.
So yeah, I see what you're saying. Like that's cool.
Yeah, and so that is kind of on the side of like being available and being present, and yeah, I think that you do a really nice job of that. It's something that I struggle with here and there, especially warming up with like a new house team, and
Yeah.
I think that maybe we can also talk about building chemistry in these terms too. But like, I think that like you put the person first behind the improv. When you get on stage, if I'm at the top in the top of a scene with you, I feel like you are there for me as a person and a player, and that's an interesting difference in the idea of listening and being connected. And I think that's what you were touching on there in the things that you're saying, Rocky. And I'm also kind of curious about like the impulse side of it. Like, do you find yourself willing to let things turn on a dime, even if you have like a clear game going or a sort of arc? Or would you agree? Am I in what I said earlier about that? Like that you are willing to do that, or is that something that you try to curb your impulses for?
I try to. I really try to go with where the scene's going, but sometimes it's hard and I fear that my face shows it. Like I try to be patient with maybe less experienced improvisers, and I'm like, oh, they're making this zany move and it doesn't make any sense to what we're doing. But I guess this is where we're going. And I feel sometimes that I can direct the scene in the moment to a better place or a funnier place. But again, I have to try to let myself not do that because, so you can't say someone is a good improviser if they can't improvise with people who are below their skill level.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, for sure.
Something I used to struggle with was, I'm supportive and everything like that, but I think in delivery, like you talk about, you don't have a really good poker face. Like,
when I'm playing regular poker, I do, but not poker.
So, my thing, my tell used to be like, yeah, we're going in this direction. Sure, yes, and let's see where it goes.
Right.
I'm over exaggerating.
I'm thrilled.
Totally
about
over exaggerating. This is because that's what we do here in this world we created.
Yeah. I also know that one of the things that James and I have like bonded over a little bit. It's such like, I mean, this is an improv podcast, so this is something we bond over is when people, I'm like nerding out hardcore on improv, but that's the point of it.
Welcome to the show.
Yeah, please. That's what we're here for. Heck yeah.
I feel like James and I get equally frustrated at the name thing. I call somebody James in a scene. He calls someone James in the scene. Somebody else calls him James in the scene. And then somebody's like, oh, what's Henry doing? Like that.
Oh, yeah.
Then you see my face, and then I'm thinking, like, how many ways can I figure out how to justify this, how to tell them that this is not the name, and then it just feels like amateur hour, and I hate it. I hate it.
That's a cousin to one of my biggest pet peeves. Like, if a female improviser comes out and like, hey kids, you wanna go see my I don't know, junkyard? Yes, yeah. Mom. You're like, what? Like, why? Oh, because she's a female. Like, no, she's playing a dude. She just scratched her balls. Yeah. I don't know, man.
Also, don't name her. Like, that is another thing to me. That I thought that's so basic when they teach you walk-ons. If the person who's walking on has an idea, let them. They'll get their idea out. Don't worry.
Yeah. The cutoff, like someone walks on, and then they have this big present. Like, oh look, it's Frank. Like, yeah, I guess I'm Frank now. Shit.
I feel like it just cuts the wind out of so many people's sails so many times, and then it's just a bummer. And then the audience is looking at you like you're unprofessional. And these are like nitpicky things, but it's just annoying sometimes.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, it's hard with names, and then the more that you stack up contradictory information, the easier it is to get frozen and in your head about things of like, and it takes you out of the play. So
Yeah.
it's definitely the better of a job you can do early on with the listening and being connected and being available and just taking a breath, the more likely it is that you're going to be able to naturally stack information without losing track of things.
Oh, yeah.
Well, yeah, that's what I was going to say. Like, I wouldn't call it nitpicky because it's a symptom of someone not paying attention.
Right.
Or not being in that moment. They're trying to write rather than improvise. Mm-hmm. And I don't have their script. So that's annoying to me.
Yeah. Nobody has their script. They're the only, they only made one copy.
Yeah.
And their handwriting is
not even
horrible.
Finished yet. Yeah.
Yeah.
This is the first draft. Excuse me. Let me play.
The first and only draft.
Yeah. So what about, let me ask you about how you balance the being consistent or like staying in the moment and trying to like connect with your partner and build something moment by moment. Is one part of what we're talking about, but like, how do you balance like curbing your impulses with, when does that become problematic if you're kind of like keeping yourself from making discoveries or, staying open to like the idea that anything can happen in improv, when you throw in random wrenches into things or if you're not listening and there's contradictory information, that's one thing. Those are probably negative side effects of not listening or not being in the moment. But there are really fun things that can happen if you chase your impulses every once in a while.
Right.
And so like, how do you kind of balance that as a player of like, I want to stay consistent and stay with what's going on, but I also want to follow honest opportunities if they happen?
I honestly attribute a lot of that to my mood or how I'm feeling that day. And the vibe of the team. Because there are some teams that can play together and they can throw monkey wrenches. It's almost more fun because, they're throwing monkey wrenches at each other. I was on a team called Hero Complex for about 4 years, and we were all so close as people and loved each other so much off stage that we were able to throw whatever at each other on stage and still be present in the moment, still take in everybody's information and celebrate everybody's ideas while still kind of, messing with each other. Can we swear on here? Or no swearing?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay.
I've done so many swears.
Okay, because I've censored myself like 3 times. I'm like, let me just ask.
Oh, no.
I got a bit of a potty mouth.
It's a conversation at the bar.
Okay, perfect.
We're not that kind of non-swearing
Okay.
bar.
So, for lack of a better word, we would fuck with each other a lot on stage.
Yeah.
And because we could. And that's not to say that can't happen with younger teams or teams that haven't been together as long. But I honestly think I have a mode. And I know when I'm in the mode and in the zone, I can feel it because I forget that I'm on stage. And I'm just playing and going and celebrating whatever I can and trying to listen as hard as possible and find those little witty one-liners, whatever. But sometimes because I'm aware I have that as a player, that kind of like tune the audience out mode. There's no cracking. I'm not going to laugh at anything I say, anything that the players say. Because I'm aware that that's how I play, if I'm not in that mode sometimes, I feel like my shows suffer. And it might not even be a suffrage where the audience can be like, people will be like, oh, that was a great show. But I know that it wasn't to the best of my ability. And that's something I struggle with just if I'm not in the zone.
Yeah, that makes sense. And especially, the idea of being like, I will definitely get into like mischief making modes.
Yeah.
So this is where maybe I can, I have 2 examples that I want to get to, but like, one, Rocky, you talked about like, if somebody makes an entrance, let them get their idea out.
Yeah.
Don't be impatient or don't be a jerk about stepping on that entrance. And I think that that's absolutely true. And most of the time, I think that there's a bad habit or just like a frenetic impatience that earlier improvisers have that will make that bad habit occur.
Right.
But I also think, like you said, on a team like Hero Complex, where you're more comfortable that somebody makes an entrance and you beat them to their idea as a way to fuck with them.
Right.
And that can be a funny
Oh.
discovery pivot in the moment.
That's yeah.
And so yes, like you have to earn those. You have to build chemistry and yada yada.
Yes.
I think that is absolutely true as well.
Yeah.
I also think it's kind of tough because what we're saying is that like up until the point when you earn it, what you're doing is training yourself to ignore your impulses to a degree and not jump on mischievous little things. And so like, how do you get back to opening yourself up once you have earned it? And get back to using it. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah, I feel like that could be really hard. We all play, or I can only speak for myself, but I do play differently depending on who I'm playing with.
Yeah.
Oh, yes. Yes.
You know?
Did you go through a period where like you were needing to open back up, like maybe working with Hero Complex, where you're like, okay, I feel like I can get to a point where I can shoot from the hip a little more, and did you have to go through like reacquainting yourself with impulses at any point? That's a question for both of you guys.
For me, I think with Hero Complex, we all were trying to grow with each other, and because we felt like a big deal team, there were a lot of heavy hitters on that team, and we felt like we needed to come out on Wednesdays and do our absolute best. And we had a small following from Baruch College. They would come and see us every week. And so we were trying to grow together, and we had slumps together and we had highs together that we rode. But I never felt so much that I needed to ignore my impulses on that team in particular, because when we were first put together, I was one of two females. It was myself and Lorraine Sink, and then 5 men. And I felt like I needed to be the best that I could be, because none of those people, including Lorraine, who was a heavy hitter improviser, none of those people are going to wait for me to catch up to them. So I just have to be at the same level as them. I don't know if that was kind of your question, but yeah, I think with Hero Complex, we went through ebbs and flows together and learned really well how to play with each other. But whenever I play with somebody new, I try to figure out how we play together and kind of take that in and observe it post-show or post-practice.
Totally. Yeah. What about you, Bob?
Well, this makes me think, I forgot who said this to me, but it's my favorite metaphor for improvising. It's like you're the last kid on the playground, and everybody on the playground already invented a game. So if you're the new kid, you might walk into the playground slowly and just kind of like warm up to people, and then eventually become yourself. Or if you're a popular kid, you run in there and you just do it. But in the meantime, both kids are discovering the game through discovery. That's sorry for the double discovery words, double downing on that. But it's. Yeah, so like when I try to play that organically, I think the only questions I ask myself when it comes to impulse, A, who am I playing with? And B, am I making this decision either out of ego, because I just want to have a moment, or is this something that's going to really help the scene? Does the scene need whatever I'm going to add? Does it need momentum? Is this going to be something I'm adding, or is this something I'm just spotlighting myself for? So,
right.
Which took a minute, but I think I play more towards like discovery now. And I hope like when I do make those unusual choices or big, bold choices, it's for the good of what we're trying to build. But then there's some people like, it's almost like when you're improvising, you're playing, you're building a house of cards together. So they want it maybe like more of an analytical type performer who wants to do particular moves in a particular way, and they kind of made the rules of the game. You kind of have to play that way because it fits their style. And and sometimes, I don't play like that, so I enjoy that challenge. So the big, bold choice for me as a performer is just to, try to do it that way rather than try to do it, in my style, because I'll have that opportunity again to,
Yeah.
And if they're fun, you get a little bit of each. We did one scene, House of Cards way, and then one next scene's gonna be my way, or some kind of fair mixture.
Right.
Yeah. And actually, you know what? Hearing the two of you talk about that, I'm realizing that like I think what I went through is kind of the opposite of my question, which was that kind of like what you were saying, Rocky, with playing in Hero Complex and being like, okay, this is a team where I challenge myself to like keep up and play 100%. I played on a team called Presto Changeo, and everybody on the team had years more experience than me. It was actually probably only like 4 years into improvising when I started that team, and I was playing out of my league.
Right.
But the benefit was that I got to like I had this big safety net with these guys that I was playing with, and that and our mission on that team was follow every impulse, let things turn on a dime. And the first few shows we did, we honored that, and it did not go well. And we had to scale back how many impulses we would follow. But we found this really nice balance of like what it is like for everybody's impulses to be kind of at free play. And I got used to that and playing that way with a couple other teams. And then I think actually what happened when I came to New York was that like with this big change in the pool of people that I'm playing with, I had to do what you were talking about, Bob, is kind of like ease my way into it. And I think what I was actually doing is not training or relearning to get in touch with my impulses, but relearning to curb my impulses because there's lots of stuff that I wanted to do that I was like, be polite, like, you know what I mean? Learn to play nice, and then hope that I can work my way back up to some of the more on the head stylistic things that I was used to.
Yeah, because sometimes when you're playing, it's like a first date. You want to be on your best behavior and like, make a good impression. And then sometimes they're playing, it's like, we've been married for 20 years. So I can do whatever I want. They know me. Yeah. They know my bad habits. They still love me.
Yeah, they're still going to do my dishes.
Yeah.
I've been doing a lot of dishes, so that's why that is fresh in my head.
That's my go-to.
No delivery, just dishes. But we digress.
So let's talk about building chemistry or like I guess learning other people's impulses too. Because if you are playing it in a different style, how do you kind of adjust to a different pace? Are there things that have worked for you if you start playing with a new team or guest on a team that plays more like slow and patient play versus like joining in on a team that moves at a quicker pace?
Yeah, so this is a great question. In July, I was placed on a team at the tank, or the Armory under the tank. The team name's Weird Cat, and they had already been together for 6 months, and I was a new addition to their team. They had lost one girl, and I was added to the team. Their style was a mono scene. Now, I'm familiar with mono scenes. I've done tons of mono scenes in the past, but I don't think I was ever on a team where our primary form was mono scene. So that is a much slower build. You know what I mean? Everybody is creating this world together. You can't really change characters only because their mono scenes over there, we only had about 15, maybe 18 minutes maximum. So you really got to get everything in there. So that was an adjustment to me to play a little bit slower, to learn good exits and entrances, not coming on too early, letting people build. And I think we got really great at playing with each other. learning about each other and each other's styles. And then because of that, we had some killer mono scenes. There was one mono scene where we played a family. We played an Italian family whose daughter has a special friend because she has not come out of the closet yet as a lesbian. And so she has this girl that she's always like bringing around. And I kind of am her mom who says, you know, we know about your friend. And then the dad is, you know, it's very stereotypical, you know, macho guy. And the kids like have all these problems, but they are a very tight-knit family. Well, we paced this show out so well, and it happened to be the one night that our coach was in the audience, David Frazier, amazing improviser and great magician. But he is.
Sorry, I didn't expect that. Like,
Yeah.
That's so cool.
He's great. But he happened to be in the audience that night, and we did this killer show. And the show was so good that the next week in practice, we spent 2 hours talking about the show. And then we had to go do our show right after. Do you think that the show right after was any good?
Oh.
Yeah, probably not.
No, it was horrible. It was horrible. It was so bad. We couldn't recreate that magic. We were all over the place. And afterwards, we were like, ooh, how the mighty have fallen. So, that was another lesson in we might know how to play really well together, and we might have learned how to play slower and do these really successful mono scenes. But honestly, if you're not just in it and ready to move on to the next show every time you do a show, you can fall on your face. Which is what we did.
Yeah.
That's what I kind of like about like a mono scene or a slower form like that, because it does really force you to establish, the groundwork. So like who you are and who you are to each other, because you have to establish all these relationship, and hopefully by doing so, you also learn something about your character. But to create that and do it right, you have to listen. So you do have to pace that out. It forces you to listen harder, because this is all information that also helps you. So even those improvisers who kind of, I don't want to say take high status, but they are writers on stage. You know, they're thinking ahead. They're trying to plan everything out. They're kind of forced to do that because they also need that information. So I think that's a really good team building exercise, just to take that time. I've coached a few. I've coached a few people, but I've coached a few troops who did have that problem of going too fast, and they were great people. You know, the sum of the parts was amazing, but when they got going, it was just like you guys are all doing your own mono scenes, and it just happens to be on the same stage.
Yeah.
So I think like just really forcing that and using forms to kind of create that pace is a really cool idea.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I agree. I think that an opportunity to do mono scene is great, or an opportunity to just do anything that's meant to be slow and longer gives you more room to navigate and feel each other out. I guess I'm wondering, like, again, there's just something in my mind about the balance between that intention of what you want to have happen, and I know it's like talking at length after a show. I know how that can like get you in your head and like or put the stakes too high for you to like recreate the magic.
Yeah.
But there's something in that story that also like makes me think of what happens in like a scene is that like you are like I know what I want to have happen in this scene, or if you feel like you've found the game, and then you're like you all of a sudden have this expectation of what's going to happen or an intention of what's going to happen. Or if you have, or even like a troupe that has a form that's like, okay, here's the form. We're going to do the opener, 3 scenes. We're going to do a run of tags, and then whatever. And then it's like, okay, you have this intention. At what point does that get in the way of that harder to name magical quality of really being in the moment, which again is like kind of means that anything could happen, and that, like, you know, you're probably not going to shake things up entirely in a moment, but like to kind of like deviate or depart from what you think is going to happen, or a willingness to do that. Like when does your expectation of what's going to happen start to work against you?
I think it can happen.
Does that make sense? I know I'm kind of like
a little
rambling.
bit. No.
Yeah.
You're so passionate. I think I know what you're asking. Basically, like, when is it not magical? When is that what you're asking?
When does feeling like you know what's going to happen, like staying connected, being available in the beginning of the scene, and you lock into it. And okay, so maybe this is where I'll use the other example I was hoping to get to, which is from a show of ours, Rocky.
Yes.
So we had this scene. Jared and I were father and son fishing.
Okay.
And Jared's like this intense dad who's telling me he's gonna leave me behind. He's like, I wanted to take you on one last fishing trip before I leave town. And
yes, this is
bye.
ringing a bell. Yeah.
Yeah. Jared has a gun and he shoots a fish.
Right.
Well, and we're having this scene, and then like a beat or two later, after Jared shoots the fish, Rocky, you came out and you were like this fisherman who was like, "Hey, you gonna eat that fish you shot?" and you start scooping the fish out of the river. And I thought, so I know what's supposed to happen in this scene between a dad leaving his son, and that what makes sense story-wise, or like improv pathway-wise,
Right.
is like, if we're going to follow anything, I'm going to go home to mom, or I'm going to go to school, or we're going to follow the dad to wherever he goes or whatever. But what I wanted more than anything in that moment is to follow this fisherman back to wherever he's taking this fish.
Yeah.
and learn more about that fisherman. So I guess I was curious about, like, for you, Rocky, like what is your feeling or intention in a moment like that? And also to just voice that, like, to me, I love those things because it could be a blow line. I'd rather have it be a portal to another unexpected storyline,
Yeah.
and that's my sensibility. So I'm just curious what your feelings are on that.
I've been told that, I do remember what scene you're talking about, by the way. That was a really fun one. Jared is just, he is the best, dude. The things he says or the moves he makes, sometimes I have to bite the side of my cheek. He is a nut. But yeah, I think I guess it's a good thing, but I tend to not think as linearly as people do. Like, it's never usually my first move to be the person playing. I wouldn't want to play his wife. I wouldn't want to play the park ranger who's like, you can't shoot the fish, because that's just no fun. So I guess what I do is I just try to look at this world that you guys created is where, a mobster-esque guy is shooting fish in the pond or the lake, wherever you catch fish. I don't know. I catch them at the supermarket, okay? But wherever you catch them, I just think that that's the more fun move. And I'm sure there's been 1,000 times in shows where I've tried to yes and in that way where they've failed. But I think that's how you get better at making those quirkier moves. And I tend to be a quirkier person too. So I think it's benefited me, because I do think that sometimes people are surprised by the moves I make.
Yes, and that's what I want to talk about. That's what I want to talk about. I'm like, how do you get better at making quirky, unexpected moves? Because the element of surprise for yourself and for the team as like, you got to keep that you got to keep yourself and your team on their toes, and you also got to keep the audience believing anything could happen.
Yeah.
And so like, there is this weird line between being available. You know what I mean? Like, I think I think what you're saying right there, Rocky, is really nailing on the head what I am trying to like figure out for myself. Is like, how do you do that in a way that is like it is risky, but you got to take risks. You know?
Yeah.
How do you do that in a way that's not like?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I would say just.
Sorry. Go ahead.
I was just gonna say, just do it. I mean, not to quote Nike, but to just do it. I'm sure there's been 1,000. Again, there's probably been 1,000 times where I've made moves where I thought that kind of move would be funny, and the audience hasn't laughed, or maybe secretly my scene partner was annoyed, or they wanted me to play, the more sensical character. But I just tend to say zanier things, and as an improviser, I think it's benefited me. And also commitment. Anytime I'm not committed to anything in a scene, it flops. The more committed I am, and that goes for anybody, commit, don't comment, just do it. And, sometimes there's going to be some gems in there.
No, I like the choice, specifically just using this example, because A, you honored everything that was already established. So it wasn't like, it's a heightened move, it's a cool choice too. And B, like, we're storytellers, and if the audience can already figure out the ending to our story, then why go further? We're trying to make this entertaining as possible. So it feels like that scene kind of already had, a plausible ending that we would have been satisfied with, and there's nothing wrong with that, but we kind of already knew what was going to happen anyway. So why not mix it up and keep people on their toes? And we call it playing for a reason. Let's be playful.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, but so it's kind of the opposite of what we were saying at the beginning of this conversation, though, right? Is that like? So I feel like it's the cycle for me where I'm like, I'm fine. It is. It literally. we were like, take things at face value and kind of like follow and listen and make sure that you're not shaking things up for no reason. And right now we're saying like sometimes you got to shake things up for no reason just to like, you know what I mean?
I think there's reason there. Like, we already know where we're going. We already know the ending of the story. So the reason is let's show him something more interesting. That to me, that's a reason.
Or and if it makes sense to the story, if you are, technically yes-anding, shout out to your shirt. If you are yes-anding the move, then you aren't necessarily shitting on that person's move. You're still honoring it in a way. You're just honoring it differently. You're honoring it, not as A, B, C, D. Maybe you're honoring it in a way that somebody didn't think of. And but I do think that there's value in doing it that way and just kind of thinking a little more outside the box. And I think I think that's doable without undercutting your scene partner.
Yeah. I agree, and again, it's almost like because, again, I'm some of this stuff I'm just kind of like realizing as we're talking through all this, but like because I feel like sometimes in scenes, I will, if I know what I'm supposed to do or what my scene partner wants me to do, I'm like so much more inclined to be like, nope. And I feel like that works for certain people that I'm more familiar with or troops that have a different mission statement. But like sometimes you got to be like, let me play nice and let me communicate and earn trust. And then I can get back to incorporating this, like these less expected moves as a spice and not appear as if I'm trying to shake off other people's ideas or undercut, what people have going on.
Totally.
Bob, what do you think of the idea of following that fisherman? Like just not just the move itself of coming on and go ahead.
No, I love it. I would have followed a fisherman. Absolutely. Because we already know their story. Like this is the most interesting thing that's happening in the scene. Let's follow that guy. I would have loved it. And like, again, going back to what we talked about before, we're talking about a scene that we know everybody who's the performer, and none of the people performing that scene are the type of artists who get so attached to their scene that when something unusual happens that was out of their control, they get upset. So I think that would be the only thing to stop me. So going back to my rules of, who am I playing with, and is this out of ego, or is this helping the scene? I thought it helped the scene, so I definitely would have wanted to follow the fisherman.
When you say, James, that you know the move you're supposed to make, but sometimes want to go in the other direction, what do you mean? Because I think you are one of the easiest in terms of love sharing the stage with you, love doing scenes with you, easiest players to play with, most fun players to play with, and also intelligent players to play with. So I don't feel in my experience that I've seen you do that, where you're like, I'm not supposed to make the move. I feel like the moves you make always honor what's supposed to happen next, whatever we decide that may be. That's
an excellent point, because I completely agree with her. Yeah. But if you do sometimes you do give us what we want, but you do it in your way, so it is like a little mystery, but it's still like honoring what's going on. I never thought you took it to Bucksville out of, I don't know, just to be an antagonist.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Well, I'm glad, and I guess part of what I'm telling you is that I'm working hard at it. Like I'm like quieting this voice that's telling me to do something else. Because especially with the party, it's like a lot of my goal just to begin with. So like you two talk about like warming up, getting to know people, and having conversations before the show, and the way that I learn people, that doesn't always work as well for me as just like feeling people out on stage. And that's a lot of what I'm doing when I'm playing with a new troupe, is just like I am feeling it out, and it's my intention to hopefully be a supportive, cooperative player that is fun to play with and adds things. So like if I'm doing that, I'm happy about it. But also at the same time, I'm like, I haven't really been doing it. The thing that I'm talking about of like doing deviations. Case in point, the fisherman thing, because I was like, I just didn't feel like it was time for me yet to do that move, and I was worried that the reaction would be like, what the fuck, James? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
No, but what a cool choice. Like, if this kid is getting abandoned by his dad and just finds some random dude in the wood to become his surrogate, I think that'd be awesome. I don't know.
Yeah, well, and I guess that's part of the intrigue of the conversation of the topic for me, is that finding that balance, and like at a certain point where we were playing together for like 6 months, the party at Pitt, and there was almost certainly a time where I could have started coming out of my shell a little bit more with my more natural style, and I don't feel like I did that, and I feel like that's what raises the question in my head of like, when do you kind of like curb your impulses, and when do you embrace them and play the moment that you feel and chase your instinct for the good of the group versus for like tending to the itches that you need to scratch as a player.
Yeah, it is hard. It's like, I mean, I've never driven with a clutch, but I imagine it's a little bit like driving with a clutch, trying to do, I know it's both feet. You got to do something with both your feet, right? Yeah. Okay.
Gas and clutch. Yeah.
That's the thing.
Yeah. Okay. No, that's I'm pretty good with sign language. You were nailing it.
Okay, because I don't know how to do this type of driving, but I imagine. But it's still going to be the example that I use. I honestly, I don't know. I mean, I do think that there's a weird part of me that just wants to answer this as you just know. I mean, I think if you're serving the scene, if what you're saying is funny, but also moving things along, or if you just need to get your little jab in, or I need to say my funny line no matter what. And how many times, have you been in a scene where you've said a funny line and before you can even get it out, somebody says something over and you're like, but that was going to be the improv line of the century. That was going to be the funniest thing. They were going to write about that in Improv Weekly. You know what I mean? Like, but somebody talks over you. It's like you can't. You just, I guess, have to say a little moment to yourself. Is this moving the scene forward? If it does, let me double down, commit really hard, and hope for the best.
I completely agree. It's your gut. You gotta listen to your gut.
Yeah.
So going back to being married 20 years and first date, when do you go in for a kiss? On a first date, you really, there's a lot more variables than 20 years of marriage. You wake up and kiss your wife, I hope.
Yeah.
Are you saying on a first date?
Are you saying the literal kiss in Teams or going for it?
No. I'm just using
analogy.
a metaphor for making a move.
Oh, yeah.
I'm making a move.
You're using this analogy.
Yeah, sorry, we need visual aids. Yeah.
No. I pick up my date in the car. We stopped somewhere. We had a nice dinner. I wasn't sure she wanted to be kissed yet, so we didn't kiss yet.
Yeah.
And then 20 years after marriage, I did kiss her, and that's how love works.
Yeah.
And improv.
Well, I think that's exactly right, Rocky, about that being the answer. And even though it's a frustrating answer, I think it doesn't make it any less true. Is that like that's what it comes down to? Is like it's a subjective experience for everyone, and you have to find it yourself and know when you know.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I think that's a really great place to wrap it up, and it's been a really, really great conversation, and I'm very tempted to change this show's title to Improv Weekly, and I appreciate you taking the time to talk with us, Rocky.
Oh, no,
it's been a great
I
conversation.
I loved it. Guys, thank you so much, and it's great to see you. It's been well, I did see you in my birthday video. That was super nice. I loved it, but
I was happy that...
Yeah, no, that was great, but this was such a fun afternoon.
Yeah, absolutely.
Awesome. It's so nice meeting you.
Yeah, you too.
Nice to.
Yeah.
Rocky, before we go, can I ask is there anything you wanted to plug? I don't know if you're doing virtual shows or anything online that people can find you on.
I'm not so I'm off and on doing shows with the Armory on Friday nights, but we usually decide that around Wednesdays. So sometimes on Friday nights I do shows at the Armory, Zoom shows on the Armory, but I haven't really been doing too much other virtual improv. That's like the one, we try to stay connected every week. So that's the one I've been kind of committing to. So I don't know if we're performing this Friday or not, but we might be. You can check, follow the Armory on Instagram. I'm also on Instagram, Rocky with 2 eyes X Balboa. And I post pretty
That's dope.
I post pretty normal stories.
Perfect. And if anything else comes up, just feel free to let us know, and we'll include it in the description.
Thank you so much.
Thanks again, Rocky. Great to talk to you, and thanks for listening in on Improv FAQ at length.